Hello, I'm Christina Rodriguez and I'm currently enrolled in the Biliteracy Strategies for Dual Language Learners class. Today I will be presenting a 4th grade social studies lesson on the regions of Texas. Included with this presentation, I will be attaching the PowerPoint as well for you all. I want to begin with the content target of this lesson. Basically, we want the students to be able to describe the regions of Texas. As for the TEKS, students will identify and compare geographic regions of Texas, such as mountains, basins, coastal, central plains, including the landforms, climate, and vegetation. As for the ALPS objective, the aim is for scholars to use accessible language and learn new and essential language in the process, as well as demonstrate comprehension of increasingly complex English, participating in shared readings, retelling or summarizing material, responding to questions and taking notes commensurate with content area and grade level needs. To start off my lesson, I want to be able to activate their prior knowledge and build on that background knowledge. I will present them with a word that they're familiar with. They might not remember it off the top of their head, but they've seen it in previous grade levels. I will present them with the word región in Spanish, region. And basically, it's for them to kind of use their thinking skills and go back to what they know about this word. And not necessarily the definition. If they do know it, even better, but basically anything related to this word. This is an example of what I would provide them with. So they would have región, and I'll give them a few minutes to write down in their interactive notebooks anything that comes to their mind. They could make a list, they could do it in bullet points, anything that comes to their mind. Eventually, we will be discussing what the actual word means and anything related to this word. So for example, in the next slide, after we've discussed it in groups, even in, maybe with a partner, we will then talk about what is the definition of región. In this case, un área geográfica identificada por características comunes. And then I will introduce either new or vocabulary that they've probably seen or maybe they've never seen it, but basically human and physical characteristics of these regions, because they will be creating these activities later pertaining to these vocabulary words. After introducing new and complex vocabulary to my students, I want to continue with the questioning. One thing that I would do is put them in groups or pairs and have them name the 4 regions of Texas for me. Basically, I would ask them, ¿Puedes nombrar las regiones de Texas? I would show them a map of Texas that would be color-coded for each region to help them eventually as a visual representation. As they're in their groups and they come up with these, with the list, I might have a group that might have all 4 regions written down. I might have a group that might not have any, but the goal is to discuss together what those regions are, and not necessarily give them the answer right away, but just have them, tell me what they know. Students will be provided with a list similar to theirs with the 4 regions, and I will explain to them that we will be discussing each region individually. Again, they will be provided with that color-coded Texas map, but now we will be identifying and pointing out each region. Here we have Llanura Coastal, which is the light blue. Then here is the Llanura Central, which is the green. Grandes Llanuras is the red, and Montañas y Cuencas is the yellow. As for the language targets, in Spanish, students will be asked yes to no questions orally about where they live or used to live using the past tense. As for English, we will review map requirements such as the total, which is the title, orientation, date, author, labels, and legends of organizing and creating a map. This is actually a tool that they will continue to use in their future grade levels. For the cross-linguistic target, students will learn the suffix of words to make that connection with the English word. For example, geografía and geography, as well as recognizing and provide noun, adjective, order agreement in both languages. Because a lot of times students tend to transfer the same rule from one language to the other, and they need to understand that it doesn't always work the same way. And having them do these activities is going to help them with making those connections to one language, from one language to the other. Earlier, I mentioned building on background knowledge, but we also want to build on oracy. The language of instruction is in Spanish, and students activate their knowledge about geography, concepts, and physical and human characteristics of place pertaining to a region. For example, religión, religion, lenguaje, language, sistema económico would be economic system. Students will use descriptive language to tell a story about where they used to live, and we're talking about their native country or where they live now. They could share this with their friends as well as with me, and we might have kids that are from the same country, which this usually gets them engaged and want to actually have these conversations. Reading comprehension. I will go with the read with orientation. So I will integrate some shared reading. So I will share and read with the students to assist them with fluency and comprehension, providing support to struggling readers. For writing, students will do an activity that pertains to dividing a piece of paper into fourths, labeling each section as one of the regions. And of course, this would be after we've discussed and learned about these regions. They will make a list of characteristics and write a statement summarizing the region. In continuation to the writing activity, students will be prompted with this question: ¿En qué región vives? In which region do you live in? This gives me an idea of what they've obtained from the lesson, and actually helps me evaluate what they've learned. For word study and fluency, students will learn word patterns by choosing words to sort and discover the pattern in their reading and writing. Words that end in ty in English often end in dad in Spanish. So an example would be community and comunidad. So basically, understanding forms of cognates from one language to the other, and not just understanding what they mean, but their spelling. That's very important. With that being said, this is where the bridge kind of comes along. The language of instruction is Spanish and English. Side-by-side anchor charts should be visually appealing for students to use as a resource. The charts must include both languages next to each other and should be color-coded. Both teachers and students will work together to create these charts. On the PowerPoint, I have an example of how that anchor chart would look like. But this is, again, we're talking about having the students look at the languages side by side, and this will help them with that word fluency. So I have another example here, which is basically a form of anchor chart. So in this case, we are looking at the Spanish and English words. If you take a close look, for example, I have the word vegetación, and then I have the word vegetation next to it. What I've done actually is underlined what is similar and circled the endings that correspond from Spanish to English. So for example, on clima and climate, I've only underlined the similarities. For populación and population, I've underlined the similarity, and then the ending ción, and how it would end in English, which is shun. And as you can see at the very the last word, we have accidentes geográficos versus landforms. The reason I've left that one alone is because that is going to be a discussion. As you can see, there's no similarities. The word changes completely from one language to another. So this is a good way, a visual representation of having, kids understand the connection between these words. And again, this is done together, teacher with students. For the summative assessment, students will draw and color code the geographic regions of Texas on a map and use geographic tools to identify major landforms, cities, and information on climate for each region. Students will also write a summary of the geographic regions and compare to the regions on a graphic organizer. As for an extension activity, I would have my students create a My Life's map using the map requirements total that we've reviewed in the class to illustrate their lives. I think it would be a fun way of implementing what they've learned throughout the lesson, as well as, they're using their creativity and knowledge of symbols, landforms, and other useful words that they've acquired. Just consider that this might compile into 2 lessons or even more, depending if I need to review anything because they're not comprehending, or depending on the length of time. As for now, this concludes my presentation. Thank you for your time and have a good day.